Hey there, stars, it's Dear Younger Me, where we look back and talk about the then and now. I'm your host, Megan Scott, and today we're talking about the real reason that I haven't gone completely insane in the middle of all of this. Faith. I was the most excited for this episode, and that's why I saved it for last. I wanted to spend as much time as I could with it. Faith is something that I struggled with a lot growing up, and something that I know a lot of people are struggling with right now. I hope that if you gain anything from any of these episodes, it's this one.
Alright. So hey guys, I'm passing out note cards today because I personally am a note
It's really weird listening to this. In past episodes, I've used old diary entries, but this is actually a recording of me in 2017. March 14th, 2017 to be exact. I had never taken a public speaking class in my life. It was my junior year of high school, so I had barely decided I wanted to be a teacher. And so, even in just rehearsing, which is what I'm doing in this recording, I'm super awkward and rambly.
Today I wanted to talk about the 5 points of prayer. You know, a lot of times
I titled the lesson The 5 Points of Prayer and listed them out as we went. 1. Confession. You can't hide from God and you don't need to. 2. Recognition. Getting over ourselves and thanking God for what happens. 3. Optimism. Zooming out on a situation and recognizing that something good must come. 4. Surrender. Giving 100% of our trust to Him. And 5. Salvation. We pray because we are saved. No ifs, ands, or buts. I remember how the lesson was supposed to look, because I was a visual learner. I'm still a visual learner. So, the 5 points of prayer: confession, recognition, optimism, surrender, and salvation. I had a little dry erase board, and if you write them out in a list, it spells out the acronym CROSS. And boy, did I think I was something. I know it sounds silly to be so excited over a catchy acronym, but it was my first time teaching, and I was insanely proud of myself for coming up with something even remotely effective. I had only really stepped into my faith about a year prior to this lesson. I grew up in churches, but never really understood. And there were a few years where I had decided that God did not exist. In that time, I was trying to figure out how to navigate a new relationship with my dad, who left when I was younger. I struggled a lot, as many kids do, with the concept of fitting in, and in efforts to do that, I ended up, let's say, getting really burned by a childhood friend who I thought I could trust. On top of that, self-image was something that I have always had major issues with. So after that experience, I got to a point where I was hurting myself and ended up dealing with an eating disorder in order to feel some kind of control over myself. I can't tell you exactly when I started trusting God. I had already been going to my current church for a few years by the time I started listening, so I don't really have a time marker. Somewhere within my sophomore year of high school is when I broke down in my room and begged God to give me some kind of sign that I wasn't alone. It was only a little under a year before the lesson that I really started to consider myself a Christian. And so, while I had found a new light and confidence in God, this was something I was more or less still teaching myself, as well as learning how to listen. It was March 15th when we were told that we couldn't come to church. The governor of North Carolina had banned gatherings of over 100, and my church, Elevation, has well over 1,000 people every weekend across multiple campuses. Like school, we were switching to online. Another place I called home was being taken by this virus, and there was nothing I could do but sit back, smile, and make a "Blessed Are We" post on Facebook.
I think so often that we need to hide our sins from God, and that's just not the way things work. We have this impression that we're supposed to be just squeaky clean,
Christians hate talking about getting angry with God. We're scared of being perceived as ungrateful in the face of other Christians, or even in the face of God.
Confession is about coming to the Lord with our problems and letting Him know that yes, I have done wrong, but Lord, I want you to cleanse me.
We always talk about things being part of the plan and let God take the wheel, and for the past few days I had been doing just that. I had gotten my tears out, taken a breath, and said, "Let God take it," just like I was supposed to. But when we got the news that we couldn't congregate, it felt like my last safe haven. My last hope was now gone as well. It felt like I had nothing to hold on to. School was gone, my relationship was strained, my friends were far, and now even my place of peace was closed. Yes, situationally I was going to be fine, and I am beyond grateful, but humans are humans, and we have emotions. And what I was feeling was anger and confusion.
Sometimes we don't see the good in a situation, and sometimes, a lot of times, it's because it just hasn't revealed itself yet.
So, online sermons work exactly how you think they would work.
However, we have to get together. Let's keep coming together, Forsake not the assembly of ourselves together. And
Pastor gets up on stage, starts preaching, and there are cameras recording and streaming. We've been doing it for years and have reached countless lives in countless different places across the world through that method. The only difference this time is that those of us who were privileged enough to go every weekend in person were now confined to watching it remotely. While I always try to encourage the idea that church is a people, not a place, I am the first to admit that it doesn't feel the same all the time. The feeling of freedom to dance and belt out lyrics in worship is confined to the awkwardness of living room walls. No one else is clapping with you when something resonates, and what I miss most is I don't get to see the tears streaming down strangers' faces as they raise their hand to accept Jesus. I am a volunteer photographer for the church, so I get to see and concentrate on those lives being changed every single weekend. While I am super thankful that we were equipped to adjust to this as fast as we did, a part of me is scared of the idea of never getting to go back to a physical church. On April 5th, Palm Sunday, we were able to have our first volunteer rally over a Zoom call. Every weekend before service, all the volunteers would rally and be reminded why we do what we do, and pray for all of the lives about to change through the front door. It was weird and awkward to sit at my laptop and hype ourselves up for a service that we couldn't work our normal jobs for, but we all had the responsibility of sharing the experience as much as possible. It seemed small until we heard the impact that we were having. With everyone who attends in person online, everyone has been sharing, and so it's reached beyond what we could even imagine.
The man said, don't be afraid. You can feel fear. It can ride in the car, but it can't drive.
In recent weeks, we've been on the topic of fear, uncertainty, and this longing to get back to normal, which is something I know has engulfed the minds and spirits of way too many. To have flesh is to feel fear. To be human is to not know, and in the same respect, what we have always known is just what we consider to be normal. In church, we've been talking about how sometimes we hang on to the negative because it's what we know, and therefore we identify it with normal.
And what if the normal that we knew is not the normal that God is leading us into next?
If you listen to the first episode of this podcast, you might remember how I discussed that just a week before being sent home from school, I was begging for another break. I got it, and now I'm begging to go back. Exodus chapter 14 talks about the Israelites finally getting out of Egypt, just as they had been praying for generations. But when the transition period of deliverance was not what they expected it to be, they were asking to go back to Egypt. Not because it was good, not because it was better, but it was what they knew. Exodus 14:12, they tell Moses, "It would have been better for us to serve in Egypt than to die in the desert."
And isn't it weird how quick we can shift to where what we want to get back to is the same thing that we wanted to escape from?
That's been really resonating with me lately. The idea that we're in a transition period right now, and what matters is not how things used to be, not even how things are right now. What matters is how we're going to come out of this. I would be a liar if I said I wasn't still angry or confused. Even now, I am so envious of Megan a few weeks ago as she got to take pictures and worship in a room full of stories and life and overflowing power. I would be a liar if I said I wasn't still scared. So I'm not going to say that. We are all still learning and adjusting. But if I have learned anything from this, it's that there's a purpose in this time of patience. People are helping people just to show love. Systems are rewriting, artists are creating, and the earth is healing. So I know that once we come out of this, we will heal too.
When I say prayers about confession, recognition, optimism, and surrender, I mean it doesn't matter how many dark things you've confessed. It doesn't matter whether you recognize a good thing when it's given. It doesn't matter if you're the most optimistic person in the room or the most pessimistic person in the room. It doesn't even matter if you've surrendered your life to Him yet. What matters is you can be flawed in all of these areas, and He's still going to invite you into salvation with arms open, stretched out from nail to nail, because that is the point of the cross.
Dear younger me, for once, instead of giving you advice, I want to thank you for taking those first hard steps, for giving me advice even when you didn't know you were going to. We have felt closer to God in this season than we have ever felt in our time on earth. We set aside time for personal Bible study every day, witness and discuss Christ with other people whenever we get the chance, and have found that we loved it so much that we've made the decision to hopefully spend at least half a year of ministry after graduating. There are no distractions in quarantine, and I think that while it is scary, it's exciting. I'm excited to see how this is going to turn out. Excited to see how God can use me after the dust settles. And I'm excited for you and your growth. I know how the end of each of your scenarios turns out, and while some might suck, they got you to me. I'm excited for the next future self, what she'll have to say about us. Time is a slippery, scary, precious thing, and I hope to never fill it with complacency ever again. With self-love, future you. Dear Younger Me wants to thank our sponsors for the last time. The Pod Class with Paul Crutcher and XLR Land University Radio. Without you guys, we would not be here. And a special thank you to you guys, the listeners. We'd still be here without you because this is an assignment, but it's nice to know that someone's listening, even if I don't know if someone's listening. This is the last episode of this series, and so I hope you got something out of it. This episode especially. I don't know if I'll keep using this as a creative outlet, so unless there's a next time, bye.